Please don't hurt me. I can't walk. The female CEO's voice, usually commanding, now a raw, desperate whisper, tore through the damp, narrow alley. Rainwater slicked the cracked pavement, forming dark, trembling pools around her. Behind the menacing figure advancing, car headlights flared, elongating the shadow into a monstrous, grotesque silhouette against the grimy brick. His pace was slow, deliberately terrifying, his fists balled, breath heavy with ill intent. She curled tighter, a crumpled heap on the cold ground, her pristine white suit smeared with the grime of desperation, blonde hair plastered to her tear-streaked face. Her left ankle, a twisted, swollen agony, pulsed with every futile attempt to move, sending fresh, agonizing tears streaming down her cheeks. In that terrifying silence, at the alley's murky opening, a different figure appeared. Tall, rugged, his shoulders slumped with the quiet weariness of a life lived hard. He cradled a small girl, cocooned in a faded yellow raincoat. His clothes were worn, his boots squelched with water, his face etched with a familiar exhaustion. But then he heard the woman's plea, so raw, so broken, and he froze. The little girl stirred in his arms, her voice a soft, tremulous query. "Daddy, is she going to die?" Gently he set her down, his hand firm on her tiny shoulder. "Stay here," he murmured, his voice soft, yet infused with an unmistakable command. She nodded, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit like a talisman. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, a silent, unwavering protector emerging from the shadows. His voice, now low and utterly commanding, sliced through the rain-soaked alley. "Step away from her, now." The aggressor turned, startled, his predatory advance momentarily halted. Tension crackled in the rain-swept alley, but the stranger's gaze, sharp, steady, unflinching, locked onto him. There was something in those eyes, not fear, not rage, but an unshakable, quiet certainty that stopped the attacker cold. He took a hesitant step back, then another, and without a single word, vanished into the deeper shadows. The blonde woman blinked in disbelief, a gasping sob catching in her throat as the man approached. Her limbs trembled, not just from the searing pain in her ankle, but from a profound, delayed shock. The little girl peeked from the alley's entrance, her eyes wide, reflecting a sudden flash of lightning as thunder rumbled overhead. The man knelt beside the woman, his voice now soft, a balm against the storm. "You're safe. I've got you." She stared at him, lips parted, unable to speak, to comprehend. She did not yet know his name, but in that moment, something shifted deep within her. And though she could not stand, though she was broken and bruised, she had just been truly seen. And her life, she instinctively knew, was about to change forever. Tyler Ford occupied the third floor of a crumbling apartment building, its walls whispering the worn echoes of countless exhausted lives. At 31, his own life had already bifurcated into a stark before and after, the chasm marked by the swift, cruel loss of his wife to cancer 2 years prior. Since then, his entire universe revolved around Lily. His days were a ceaseless grind as a washing machine repairman, taking every available job, each paying just enough to stave off the darkness and keep the fridge humming. Most days, the scent of rusted pipes and harsh detergent clung to him, a persistent reminder of his struggle. But he never minded. As long as Lily had crayons, warm meals, and a safe place to dream, he could endure the aching joints and the looming threat of late rent notices. There was a time when Tyler wore a different uniform, a different identity. He was a rescue worker, a firefighter-paramedic whose nerves were tempered steel, his heart trained to instinctively race towards danger, not away from it. A long, jagged scar on his left arm, a silent souvenir from a burning house where he'd snatched a small girl from the maw of the flames, whispered of that past. He rarely spoke of it. Some memories, he believed, weren't meant for honor, but for quiet, solitary carriage. Now his most precious cargo was his daughter, Lily, a vibrant 6-year-old with wild curls and a giggle that possessed the rare power to shake the deepest sadness from any room. She was inseparable from her battered box of crayons. "Colors make things better," she would always insist, and her small, vibrant drawings, blooming flowers, soaring rainbows, stick figures holding hands, filled their modest home, painting a world that, though tiny, was relentlessly bright. That rainy evening, Tyler had promised her a small, coveted treat, a hot dog from the corner stand, a reward for enduring the arduous grocery run. They had merely cut down a familiar back alley to save a few steps when the scream pierced the night. A woman's voice, trembling, pleading, a sound that instantly pulled Tyler back into a life he thought he had left behind. That night, Isabel Monroe had not intended to run. But when her fiancé, David Langston, the smooth, calculating CFO of her own company, had locked the opulent hotel suite door behind him and his voice began to rise, something within her, long suppressed, finally snapped. For months, he had applied relentless pressure, a subtle, insidious campaign to force her to sign over control of critical assets within their meticulously structured joint holdings. Their impending marriage was, in its stark truth, merely another strategic maneuver in her powerful father's relentless quest to secure absolute dominance in the cutthroat tech world. But Isabel, beneath her polished exterior, was not built for gilded cages. She had refused. And when his hand, usually so charming, gripped her wrist with unexpected force, she reacted instinctively. She snatched the laptop, its contents a digital weapon of incriminating files, and fled, barefoot, into the unforgiving rain. She had never run like that before, not through grimy alleys, not with her heart hammering in her chest like a hunted animal. She slipped, her ankle giving way with a sickening crunch. She fell hard on the cold, unforgiving concrete. Still she clutched the laptop against her chest, a desperate, solitary lifeline. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the white-hot pain in her leg blurring her vision. Her pristine designer suit was ruined, torn at the shoulder, soaked to the bone. Her phone, a critical link to her world, had been lost somewhere on the unforgiving street. The man she once trusted was getting closer. She could hear his relentless footsteps. And that was when she saw him. Tyler carried her in silence, the rain having softened to a gentle drizzle by the time they reached his modest building. Isabel's body trembled uncontrollably, a mixture of cold, shock, and residual terror. She clung fiercely to the laptop, her grip unyielding, even as agonizing waves of pain radiated from her ankle. Tyler said nothing, only subtly adjusted her in his arms, further shielding her from the biting wind. He gently lowered her onto the worn couch, his voice a quiet anchor. "It's okay. You're safe here." Lily appeared a moment later, tiptoeing through the doorway in her oversized rain boots, her cherished bunny clutched in one arm. Her gaze, fixed on Isabel, was filled not with fear but with a serious, penetrating curiosity only a child can possess.
Then she tilted her head, her voice a small, poignant echo. "Daddy, why is she crying like me when I miss Mommy?" Tyler froze. Isabel's breath hitched, a raw, involuntary sound. She turned her face away, as if the innocent words had pierced a wound she hadn't known existed. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the couch, a desperate attempt to ground herself. She desperately wanted to speak, but the words were lodged somewhere deep, unreachable. "She's had a hard day, honey," Tyler said softly, his voice gentle. "Sometimes grown-ups cry too." Lily nodded solemnly, her small face mirroring the profound gravity of the moment, then wandered off towards her room, her little boots squeaking with each step. Tyler returned with a clean towel, wrapping it gently around Isabel's shivering shoulders. "I'll get you something warm. Tea, okay?" She nodded mutely, still unable to articulate her thoughts. He disappeared into the tiny kitchen. Isabel leaned back into the worn cushions, still damp, still cold. Her ankle throbbed with a relentless rhythm. Her heart ached worse. She had navigated penthouses, frequented luxury spas, commanded mahogany-lined corporate boardrooms. None of those glittering, hollow places had ever felt quite like this. Small, imperfect, yet infused with something she couldn't name, something that simultaneously terrified and profoundly drew her in. In the deepest hours of the night, Isabel awoke with a sharp gasp. The room was shrouded in darkness save for a soft, reassuring glow spilling from the hallway. Her ankle still pulsed, a dull ache, but the searing pain had receded. A profound quiet filled the apartment. No wailing sirens, no menacing footsteps behind her, no one shouting. She sat up slowly, disoriented, unsure of how long she'd truly slept. The blanket that had covered her had slipped to the floor. Her laptop, still clutched even in unconsciousness, rested by her side. A wave of guilt washed over her. She had barged into a stranger's life, disrupting its fragile rhythm. She had no right. Slowly, painstakingly, she rose, biting back a sharp hiss of pain as her foot met the cool floor. She limped towards the door, her sole objective to vanish before dawn, leaving no note, no thank you, just a silent disappearance. But as her hand reached for her shoes by the door, she stopped. They weren't wet anymore. They had been meticulously dried, patched with careful, deliberate stitches where the loose sole had begun to fray. Next to them, a freshly folded towel, soft and warm. On top of it, a small, unassuming piece of paper. The handwriting was rough, unrefined, yet steady. Your foot's not better yet. You can stay. It's okay. Isabel stared at the simple message for a long, immeasurable moment. No conditions, no unspoken expectations, no discernible price. Just pure, unadulterated kindness. She sank slowly to the floor, the paper trembling in her hand. Her entire life had been a relentless battle to prove herself, to be sharp enough, strong enough, worthy enough. But here, in this tiny apartment with a broken floorboard near the sink and a vibrant tapestry of crayon drawings adorning every wall, she felt something she had never encountered in her glass-towered world. An unqualified acceptance, for nothing more than simply being. The first morning after, Isabel awoke to the faint, comforting whistle of a kettle and the soft clatter of pans from the tiny kitchen. For a fleeting moment, she imagined herself back in her penthouse, staff orchestrating breakfast according to a precise schedule. But then her eyes registered the modest couch beneath her, the worn curtains fluttering with a gentle draft, and the cheerful crayon drawings taped across the refrigerator door. She was not in her world anymore. Tyler appeared carrying a steaming mug. He placed it on the small table beside her, the sharp, invigorating scent of ginger filling the air. "Drink this," he said, his voice a calm anchor. "It'll help with the pain." She sat up slowly, testing her injured ankle. It still throbbed, a dull ache, but the swelling had visibly receded from the night before. She sipped the tea. It was spicy, robust, and strangely, profoundly comforting. "You made this yourself?" she asked, a note of genuine surprise in her voice. "Old habit," he replied, sitting casually on the edge of the coffee table, a roll of fresh bandages in his hand. "Ginger tea, clean water, steady hands. That's all it takes sometimes." Without another word, he gently lifted her injured foot onto his lap. His touch was steady, deliberate, yet exquisitely careful, never lingering, never invasive. He meticulously removed the old bandage, cleaned the tender wound with practiced ease, and began to rewrap it. Isabel watched in silence, a quiet fascination. For years, she had been perpetually surrounded by assistants and advisors, yet none had ever offered her this level of personal, patient care. Care devoid of expectation, pure in its selfless attention. "You've done this before," she murmured, a statement rather than a question. He nodded once. "Rescue work. Fires, accidents. You learn to keep calm even when you're falling apart inside." Her eyes softened, a wave of empathy washing over her. She wanted to ask more, to delve deeper into his unspoken history, but before she could, he reached for her torn jacket. From a small shelf, he retrieved a humbled sewing kit and began threading a needle with focused precision. "You don't have to," she started, protesting faintly. "I know," he interrupted gently, his gaze fixed on the frayed fabric. "It's worth fixing." The thread, a little uneven, the stitches imperfect, yet he worked with such profound concentration that something inside Isabel's chest cracked open. The tears came suddenly, unexpectedly, unstoppable. She covered her face with her hands, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks. Tyler paused, his brow furrowed with concern. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, her voice cracking with emotion. "No, I'm not used to this. To being cared for." He didn't push for an explanation, didn't pry. He simply handed her a tissue and said, "Everyone deserves it. Even you." Just then, small footsteps pattered across the worn floor. Lily appeared, her wild curls a charming disarray, her pajamas emblazoned with tiny stars. She clutched a piece of paper tightly to her chest. Without hesitation, she walked over and placed it carefully in Isabel's lap. "This is for you," Lily announced proudly. Isabel unfolded the paper. It was a crayon drawing, a vibrant burst of colors filling the page. A tall man with brown hair, a small girl in cheerful yellow shoes, and beside them, an empty outline of a woman with golden hair. Confused, Isabel looked up. "Who is this?" Lily smiled, a wide, innocent grin, pointing at the empty figure. "That's you! I left the space empty for a long time, waiting for someone who belongs. I think it's supposed to be you now." Isabel's throat tightened, her hands trembling as she held the child's drawing. "Sweetheart," she whispered, struggling to find words. "Why me?" "Because you're here," Lily answered simply, her logic unassailable. "And you look like someone who needs a family." Isabel let out a sound that was half laugh, half choked sob. She pressed the picture to her chest as tears spilled freely, a torrent of release. For so long, her life had been a relentless battlefield of boardrooms, contracts, and crushing expectations. No one had ever truly left a space for her, only demands for what she must become. But here, in this tiny apartment with a broken floorboard near the sink and a vibrant tapestry of crayon drawings adorning every wall, she felt something she had never known in her glass-towered world. An unqualified acceptance, for nothing more than simply being. She looked at Tyler, who stood silently in the doorway, observing the profound exchange. His expression remained unreadable, yet his eyes communicated everything: acceptance, patience, and a quiet, profound hope. He dared not speak, knowing this moment belonged to Isabel and Lily. Isabel turned back to Lily, managing a tear-streaked smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the kindest gift I've ever been given." Lily giggled, a bright, joyous sound, and picked up her crayon box. "Then I'll make it official. Perpy dress? Right?" Isabel nodded, laughing softly through her tears. "Yes, make it purple." And as Lily filled in the empty outline with bold, confident strokes of color, Isabel felt something deep within her loosen, something soft, something profoundly alive. For the first time in years, she felt what it truly meant to belong. Isabel's ankle, though slowly mending, remained a stubborn testament to her ordeal. Each morning brought a fraction more strength, a little less pain, but walking remained a challenge. She despised the feeling of weakness, the unfamiliar dependency. Yet Tyler never allowed her to feel diminished. He offered his arm without a word, letting her lean on him as they navigated the small apartment. When she stumbled, he steadied her with a firm, gentle hand. When she winced, he paused, his patience unwavering.
There was no pity in his actions, only an unwavering presence, a quiet, solid support. "Just one step at a time," he would murmur gently, his voice low and calm. Isabel would nod, focusing on the rhythm of their movement. Step, breathe, balance. It became their quiet ritual, a silent rhythm of burgeoning trust that neither of them dared to name aloud. One sunny Saturday morning, Lily, with the unshakable authority only a 6-year-old can wield, declared it was time for pancakes. "Daddy makes them okay," she conceded with an exaggerated shrug, "but I bet Isabel makes them fancy." "I wouldn't count on it," Isabel warned with a smirk. "I've never actually cooked anything myself." Lily's eyes widened in genuine astonishment. "Never? Nope. Not even toast." Tyler raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his steady gaze. "That's about to change." They gathered in the small kitchen, elbows bumping companionably as they mixed batter in a cracked ceramic bowl. Lily stood on a chair to reach the counter,
her curls bouncing with excitement as she issued commands like a seasoned chef. More milk, not too many eggs, and wait for the bubbles before flipping. Isabel, a corporate titan reduced to culinary novice, tried valiantly to follow the directions, but the first pancake stubbornly stuck to the pan. The second folded in on itself like a confused origami. The third, inexplicably, caught fire. Tyler, with the practiced efficiency of a former firefighter, snatched the pan off the burner, waving a dish towel at the thin trail of smoke. "I think that one's yours," he joked, nudging the blackened blob towards Isabel's plate. They all laughed then, real, uninhibited laughter that rumbled from the belly, loud and unguarded. It filled the small kitchen, chasing away any lingering shadows, like sunlight bursting through a storm. When they finally sat down to eat, the pancakes were a motley crew, uneven, some slightly burnt, others still defiantly raw in the middle, but Lily, utterly delighted, took a huge bite, her face smeared with syrup. "These are dorky pancakes," she declared with joyful finality. "But dorky is good." They ate slowly, letting the golden light pour over the table, softening the edges of their small, imperfect world. Outside the window, the city continued its ceaseless, indifferent hum, but inside, time seemed to melt, to become something soft and fluid. Lily chattered animatedly about her school day, how she had nearly won the spelling bee, how her teacher wore socks emblazoned with cats, and how, in a moment of pure, innocent pride, she had informed the entire class that Isabel was her maybe new mom. Isabel froze for a breathless half-second, her eyes meeting Tyler's across the table. He didn't react, didn't flinch. He simply reached over and poured more syrup onto Lily's plate, as if it were the most natural, unremarkable statement in the world. That evening, after Lily had finally drifted to sleep, surrounded by a comforting nest of coloring books and plush animals, Isabel and Tyler sat together on the worn couch, watching the soft, hypnotic flicker of distant headlights from the street below. The television was off, its dark screen a mirror to the quiet intimacy that now filled the space between them, a quiet that was full, not empty. Isabel pulled the blanket closer, her body still bearing the pleasant ache from her earlier determined practice steps. Without thinking, she leaned sideways, resting her head gently on Tyler's shoulder. He didn't move, a steady, unyielding presence. She could feel the rhythmic beat of his heart beneath her cheek, the quiet warmth of his presence grounding her. "You don't know, but you've saved me from so many things." He heard her. He didn't turn, didn't ask what she meant. He simply said, his voice a low, steady rumble, "I didn't save anyone. I just saw someone who needed help." She closed her eyes. That answer, quiet, honest, utterly unheroic, cut through all the noise, all the superficiality she had lived with for years. No one had ever looked at her and simply seen a person before. They had seen opportunity, strategy, success. But Tyler, he saw someone who was hurting, truly hurting, and instead of walking away, he had simply stayed. And that, she realized, was what love might actually be. Not grand, sweeping gestures, but the quiet, unwavering willingness to stand still with someone until they found the strength to walk again. It began with a distant phone ringing in the hallway, then the insistent buzz at the front door, then the loud, firm, too familiar knock. Isabel froze, her hands still slick with dish soap. Tyler glanced out the window, then swiftly drew the curtain. "Don't move," he said, his voice calm, steady. She didn't need to ask. The moment she had seen the sleek black car parked discreetly on the street, she knew. They had found her. Within hours more arrived, a cameraman, a woman in a tightly tailored blazer clutching a microphone, A man from legal, his tie screaming damage control. The sidewalk outside the modest apartment building transformed into a low-key spectacle. Tyler stood guard by the door, arms folded across his chest, his body a silent, formidable barrier blocking the peephole. From the bedroom, Lily's small voice called out softly, "Why are people outside?" "It's okay, honey," Isabel called back, forcing a steady cadence into her voice. "They're just lost." Later that evening, as the persistent reporters finally tired and the aggressive knocks faded into a quiet, defeated silence, Isabel received a message from the board. An offer. A ridiculously generous one. Millions of dollars in new compensation, full reinstatement, a complete rebranding, meticulous reputation management. All she had to do was return, sign the papers, smile for the cameras, and pretend none of it had ever happened. She stared at the message on her laptop screen for a long, quiet time. Then, with a definitive click, she closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen, where Tyler stood, methodically drying a dish with an old checkered towel. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice clear, resolute. He didn't look up right away. "Sure?" "Yes," she affirmed, her conviction solid. "I've been offered more money than I could ever possibly spend, but not once in all those years did I wake up feeling like I do here." He turned to her then, his eyes serious, searching. "How do you feel here?" She hesitated, then answered, her voice soft but unwavering. "Real. Seen. Safe." He nodded once, a profound understanding passing between them. That was all he needed. By morning, their modest bag was packed. Tyler carefully settled Lily into his old truck, and they drove out of the city, leaving behind the gleaming towers and the suffocating demands. They followed winding roads, flanked by trees that had just begun to blush gold with the first whispers of autumn. Their destination was a quiet farmhouse nestled behind a grove of ancient birch trees. It belonged to Tyler's mother, a retired nurse with soft gray hair and hands that possessed an uncanny ability to make anyone feel like a cherished child again. She took one look at Isabel, offered no questions, simply a warm smile, and said, "There's warm bread in the oven and a clean bed upstairs." That night, beneath a sky ablaze with stars and a profound, healing silence, Isabel and Tyler sat on the porch steps, a worn quilt draped over their knees. "I used to think I had everything," she confided, her voice a quiet murmur. "Titles, property, power." He said nothing, simply waited. "And yet," she continued, "it was all hollow. I didn't realize how much I had given up just to be seen as successful." Tyler took a slow, measured sip of tea, then spoke, his voice low. "They only saw your name, not you." She nodded, a profound understanding in her eyes. "Exactly." He looked out across the vast, moonlit field. "I know what that's like," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "To be seen as something you're not." She turned to him, her gaze gentle. "Tell me." He took a long, steady breath. "There was a fire, years ago. A small house. I was the first on the scene. Pulled a little girl out. She didn't make it. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough." She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You still carry it, don't you?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Every day." There was no need for more words.
The silence between them was not heavy, but shared, honored, a deep communion of shared burdens. She didn't attempt to fill it with empty apologies. He didn't fill it with false bravado. They simply sat there, their fingers intertwined beneath the vast, silent night sky. Two people who had each lost something immeasurable, and now, quietly, tentatively, had begun to find something else entirely. They didn't speak of love or grand promises, but when Tyler glanced at her and she met his eyes without flinching, they both understood. They were waiting for each other, and neither of them was waiting alone anymore. The boardroom was colder than she remembered, not in temperature, but in its stark, unforgiving energy. Polished glass walls, unforgiving marble floors, and cold metal fixtures reflected every sterile inch of the space where Isabel Munro had once commanded attention with merely a glance. Now she limped. Her steps echoed in an uneven rhythm, one heel dragging ever so slightly from the still healing ankle. She wore no designer gown, no glittering diamond accessories, just a clean, unadorned navy suit and a determination burning in her eyes like a fire refusing to be extinguished. Every head in the room turned as she entered. The whispers started immediately, a low, buzzing hum. She came back. She actually showed up. What is she thinking? But no one dared to stop her. David Langston stood at the front of the room, a smug, relaxed posture in the seat that had once been hers. He smirked, leaning into the microphone.
David Langston stood at the front of the room, a smug, relaxed posture in the seat that had once been hers. He smirked, leaning into the microphone. "Ms. Monroe," he purred, oozing false politeness. "How utterly unexpected. I assumed you'd finally accepted your rightful place off the board." Isabel didn't flinch. She walked straight to the center of the room, steadying herself with one hand on the polished table as she faced the formidable crowd of shareholders, executives, and former allies. Her voice, though soft, was clear, unshaken, resonating with a newfound authority. "I came back to finish this the right way." David opened his mouth to respond, a sneer forming, but she simply raised her hand. Calm, quiet authority, the kind she used to wield like a sharpened blade. "I may not walk the same way I used to," she said, a brief, almost imperceptible glance at her ankle, "but I stand taller now, because I stand for myself." The room hushed, a profound silence falling. With one confident tap on her laptop, the large screens behind her flickered to life. Spreadsheets, emails, confidential memos, a damning torrent of irrefutable proof all streamed into the stunned room. Evidence of fraudulent dealings, manipulated contracts, and the pervasive internal corruption orchestrated by David and several other complicit board members. Gasps broke the suffocating silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably, their faces now pale with dawning realization. Isabel turned slowly, deliberately making eye contact with every single person in the room, her gaze unwavering. "You thought I disappeared because I was weak, but I left because I needed space. Space to remember who I was before you all convinced me I had to be someone else." David stood up abruptly, frantically attempting to regain control, his face contorted. "This is reckless. Do you have any idea what this could cost you?" She looked at him, truly looked, and for the very first time, she saw how truly small he was. "I do," she said, her voice unwavering, "and I'm ready to pay it." She pulled a final crisp document from her folder and placed it on the table with deliberate precision. "This is my formal resignation, effective immediately. I'm relinquishing my position, my shares, and every last piece of control you ever thought you had over me." The silence that followed was thunderous, an almost physical weight. "You can keep your board seats, your stock options, your empire built on fear and silence," she added, her voice now edged with a cold triumph. "But I will no longer be a part of it." One of the shareholders, An older woman who had mentored Isabel in her early, ambitious years leaned forward, her voice cracking with a mixture of awe and grief. Why? Isabel's voice softened, yet gained an even deeper resonance, an undeniable strength. Because I am not a product. I am not a brand. I am not a bargaining chip in someone else's game. I am a person. The older woman nodded slowly, blinking back sudden emotion. David, still standing, utterly defeated, tried one last desperate plea. You'll regret this. You're throwing away everything. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the very first time she saw how truly small he was. I do, she said, her voice unwavering, and I'm ready to pay it. She pulled a final crisp document from her folder and placed it on the table with deliberate precision. This is my formal resignation. Effective. Immediately. I'm relinquishing my position, my shares, and every last piece of control you ever thought you had over me. The silence that followed was thunderous, an almost physical weight. You can keep your board seats, your stock options, your empire built on fear and silence, she added, her voice now edged with a cold triumph. But I will no longer be a part of it. One of the shareholders, an older woman who had mentored Isabel in her early ambitious years, leaned forward, her voice cracking with a mixture of awe and grief. Why? Isabel's voice softened, yet gained an even deeper resonance, an undeniable strength. Because I am not a product. I am not a brand. I am not a bargaining chip in someone else's game. I am a person. The older woman nodded slowly, blinking back sudden emotion. David, still standing, utterly defeated, tried one last desperate plea. You'll regret this. You're throwing away everything. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the very first time, she saw how truly small he was. I do, she said, her voice unwavering, and I'm ready to pay it. She gathered her laptop and folder with quiet grace. As she walked out, step by limping step, her head held high, no one dared stop her. Not this time. And when the elevator doors closed softly behind her, she didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply exhaled, a profound, liberating breath. Outside, the sun had begun its majestic descent, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose. The city below hummed with its endless, indifferent life. Isabel stepped onto the sidewalk, no longer a CEO, but simply a woman who had, at long last, chosen herself. And for the first time in years, her shoulders weren't burdened by the weight of an empire, only the lightness of her truth. And that, she realized, was more than enough.
When Isabel returned to the apartment, it was exactly as she remembered. Modest, warm, and alive with a quiet, unassuming joy. The late afternoon sun spilled through the kitchen window, casting golden rays across the worn floor. On the small balcony, Tyler was crouched beside a planter, his hands dirty with soil, helping Lily meticulously dig out a wilted marigold, their faces alight with shared determination. Isabel stood silently in the doorway, watching them, her heart overflowing. She stepped out slowly, her voice tender, a question hanging in the air. "Do you have room for one more in this garden?" Tyler looked up, his face illuminated not with surprise, but with the calm, profound certainty of someone who had been patiently waiting. He nodded once.
always. Lily, a streak of dirt smudged on her cheek, ran to Isabel, a proud grin stretched wide across her face. "We're planting new flowers today. This one's going to be orange. You can pick the next one." Isabel knelt, digging her hands into the warm earth with them. There, in the simple, quiet act of planting something new, something alive, she felt her own roots begin to take hold, solid and deep. Days blossomed into weeks, and Isabel poured her fierce, renewed energy into something she had only dared to dream of: the Lily House. It was a nonprofit organization, a sanctuary for women who, like herself, had been manipulated, abused, or simply discarded by the oppressive power structures they had navigated. Tyler, with his quiet strength, helped build the website. Lily, with her pure, unshakable wisdom, insisted on the name. "Because flowers grow better when they have sunshine," Lily explained with simple conviction, "and love." At the very heart of the Lily House's mission was this foundational idea: no one should ever have to earn safety or beg for kindness. The world, Isabel knew, had failed so many women. And she, with every fiber of her being, was going to help rewrite that story, one healed life at a time. One evening, after a shared dinner and a gloriously messy round of pancake flipping practice, the three of them curled up on the couch. Lily nestled into Isabel's side, surrounded by a delightful chaos of crayons and drawings scattered on the coffee table. The soft, distant hum of the city drifted in through the open window, a gentle counterpoint to their quiet domesticity. Lily turned to Isabel, her face serious, as ever. "Will you stay here forever?" Isabel looked into her big, hopeful eyes. "I drew you into our family already," Lily added, lifting a cherished picture from her pile. Three stick figures, a tall man, a little girl, and a blonde-haired woman in a bright dress, standing together in front of a blooming flower garden. "I don't want to erase you later." Isabel's throat tightened with emotion. She pulled Lily close, burying her face in the child's wild curls. "If you ever need me, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with tears, "I'll always be here." Later that night, Tyler found her on the small balcony, gazing out over the glittering tapestry of the city below. "I have something for you," he said, stepping quietly beside her. From his pocket, he pulled a small bracelet, crudely woven from multicolored threads, uneven but undeniably handmade. Isabel took it gently, her fingers tracing its simple beauty. "Lily made it. She called it a commitment bracelet." He smiled, a soft, warm light in his eyes. "She said, it's not a wedding ring, but she was wondering if maybe you'd want to be an unofficial mom first." Isabel's throat tightened with emotion. She pulled Lily close, burying her face in the child's wild curls. "If you ever need me, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with tears, "I'll always be here." In the months that followed, Isabel's days were filled with healing, both her own and that of countless others. The Lily House bloomed, its walls echoing with stories of resilience, of women finding their footing again, of children smiling for the first time in months. Isabel, her voice softer, yet imbued with an unwavering strength, spoke at community events, worked late with dedicated volunteers, and always returned to the apartment, what had undeniably become home. One morning, Lily burst in from the balcony, clutching a fresh drawing, her face beaming. "Look," she cried proudly, "it's us planting flowers. It's our forever garden." Isabel knelt beside her, kissing her cheek, her heart swelling with an emotion too profound for words. "Yes, sweetheart, it's exactly that." In the gentle hum of everyday life, in shared breakfasts, hands stained with garden soil, and quiet nights of reading bedtime stories, Isabel discovered a peace no corporate title had ever bestowed. She wasn't just safe, she was seen, she was loved. And this time, it wasn't because she held power, it was because She had chosen to stay and had in turn been chosen. Sometimes family isn't something you're merely born into. It's something you meticulously build, one act of kindness at a time. Isabel hadn't just walked away from power. She had walked resolutely towards something profoundly real. A little girl who believed in her without question, a man who never once asked her to be anything but herself, and a life where love didn't come with a complex set of conditions, only simple, profound choices. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need a little light today. And if you believe in the transformative power of love, healing, and second chances, subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales, because every week we bring you stories that remind us kindness is the richest, most enduring love story of all.